The Collective Action Solidarity Trust.
Let justice be done, though the heavens fall.
The C.A.S.T is a newly formed action group of Bermuda residents, citizens, and businesses who are dedicated to improving the state of Bermuda's justice system, especially as it relates to the recovery from any public mismanagement of the pandemic.
The C.A.S.T holds the view that many of the potentially excessive pandemic protocols may have caused injury to a wider cross-section of individuals and businesses than was absolutely necessary. Those aggrieved have a right to be heard as a matter of natural justice and public safety.
We invite all interested parties and individuals of Bermuda to carefully document the range of physical, financial, legal, emotional, and mental damages they have suffered or may still be suffering from the alleged mishandling of the pandemic.
To participate in the adjudication process, please visit our website, jointhecast.org, and submit your claim by Thursday, April 14, 2022.
The Collective Action Solidarity Trust.
Let justice be done, though the heavens fall.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Pandemic and this evening's public forum for the C.A.S.T. Tonight, we're going to get an opportunity to share some information about the C.A.S.T. You get an opportunity also to meet some of the members. And also, we would like the public to ask any questions that you have concerning the C.A.S.T. and the whole adjudication process. My name is Eugene Dean. Tonight, I'll be your host. And also, I am a trustee of the C.A.S.T. as well. So without further ado, let me introduce you to some of the C.A.S.T. members who are joining us this evening. To my right, I have Christine Hassel. Greetings, Christine.
Greetings. It's lovely to be here this evening and have a conversation.
Yes, give thanks. And to Christine's right, we have Mel Dupre. Greetings, Mel.
Greetings. Thank you for having us.
Yes, give thanks. And joining us live from the UK, we have Michael Watson and Sophia Cannonier. Greetings.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you, Eugene. Nice to see everyone.
Greetings. Give thanks. So tonight we're going to go over a few things. But I thought I'd start off by just asking you guys a few questions. Just about why people should get involved. I'm sure when this announcement came out, the community had many thoughts. Some people maybe were excited. Other people wondering, what on earth are you thinking? And others just curious about what this is all about. So, you know, what would you say, Mal, is so good about this initiative? Like, why do you figure that, and why do you figure that people should get involved?
Well, my experience of being part of the C.A.S.T is that we've become a family. And it feels like we are good support for one another. There's been a lot of mayhem created in the last couple of years. And that's not to point a finger or to put blame, but just recognizing what is. And that is that there's been a lot of chaos. People's lives have been turned upside down. And it's been quite traumatic for some people, for many people, actually. So to be left alone in that is a bit much. So the cast, as I see it, is an opportunity for us to come together, to be a support for one another, to try to make sense of what has happened. In the first instance, you know, that's a starting point for me.
Right. All right. Give thanks. Mike and Sophia, what are your thoughts about, you know, the cast, and for all those who are wondering, like, what's so good about this initiative? Why should people get involved?
Well, I think, Eugene, collectively, as we come together under one banner, we've become one voice, and people are very fearful about speaking out right now, even though their personal experiences have affected them. Their personal experiences are not being heard. And I think as a collective of people, when you start to share your story, you can start to heal some of those things that have gone wrong, whether it be, you know, some sort of financial situation, or you've lost a job, or there's some sort of illness. Then I think collectively, as a group of people, a community of people, that's where the healing has to begin.
Sophia, anything to add to that?
Yes, Eugene, you know, I just love theater, and we highly recommend that the concerned community of our island of Bermuda join the cast for the safety of themselves, for the safety of others. I joined the cast to protect myself, to protect my family, and to protect my community.
So when we're looking at it, we're thinking about collective strength, or strength in numbers, unity, working together, things of that nature. You know, it appears to me by looking at the comments online that a lot of people have focused on the lawsuit part, and, you know, the punishment or money or lawyers and things of that nature. And, you know, from the comments that you've shared, I think it's important for us to reflect on the community side of it. You know, we can think about, okay, what's the government going to do? How would they even pay for all of this if there was anything found out where it was wrong, or, you know, the government doesn't have any money now? You know, people are thinking about that. But what about the people who are hurting? What about the people who don't even have the courage or the capacity to even speak in a public forum like this? You know, or a challenge to even communicate with their families, you know, or their work colleagues, or their employer, or things of that nature. You know, how do we support them? And if there is no mechanism to support them, then what happens to those people? Are they just left alone to suffer silently? You know, so I think that's an important part for people to consider. Christine, and anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I joined the cast because I'm with like-minded people that are supporting and presenting a different view. I think it's an opportunity for people to tell their story, and an opportunity for accountability and pushing for accountability. Part of healing, I think, is accountability.
Yeah.
So I joined, and I found that I'm now part of a family, and it's really wonderful.
Okay. All right. Give thanks. So for those who are wondering, you know, okay, I get involved in the cast, right? What can the cast do for me? You know, so what can people expect to get out of this experience? Anyone want to contribute to that?
I'll say something.
Yeah, Gene, I can begin with that one.
What's that? All right, go ahead, Mike.
Again, I think collectively as one voice. Collectively, we become stronger. You know, as a community, we become stronger. And as individuals who may be scared to speak out, they can come to us in the strictest of confidence, and begin to share their story. The most important part of the healing process is that they get this story out, you know, whatever's happening to them. But more importantly, what the cast represents is an opportunity for somebody to listen, and for these people to be heard. because as we've seen over the last 2 years, there's been a lot of disenfranchised groups of people out there. People are not being listened to. And that falls on many sides of the argument. Nobody's being listened to. And so the cast is an opportunity for people to speak, but more importantly, it's an opportunity for them to be listened to.
Mal, any further comments?
Yes, I was going to say, people do the best with what they think they have available. So if they don't have alternative views, if they don't have another point of understand, a frame of reference, their mind will just go to what they know and not be open to other possibilities. So when we are exposed to other ways of thinking or exposed to a different viewpoint, that's when we can draw from many different things, and that's when our mind becomes open. So we don't want to be limited with information. We don't want to just shut things down. And that doesn't mean that we have to be open to everything. But it does mean let's look at another way. And how can we bring that into our consciousness, our frame of reference to help us to move forward? Right. So the cast can offer that as an opportunity. We're not saying that this is the only way, but this is offering another viewpoint. So come and be heard, share your story, and that's teaching us. And we can teach you, and we can grow together and heal together and move on from this. That's what I'm feeling.
Right. Anything else to add to that, Christine?
No, I think it's been said very well.
Yes, it's said very well. Yeah, no problem.
I'd like to add something.
Oh,
okay,
Sophia does.
Yeah.
I'd like to add something, Eugene. What can the cast do for me, and what can the cast do for our community? Well, harms have been done, and this is really an outlet. And it was just, as Christine said, it will be very good to see people held accountable. Closure.
Right.
So just to go further on what Sophia just said about accountability and closure, I think that from the comments, you're right. A lot of it is about, government and the money. Personally, for me, it's about accountability. We have had government that and others that have controlled the narrative for 2 years, and it's one viewpoint, and anyone who deviates from that viewpoint is not being heard. With the cast, whatever your viewpoint is, it's welcomed and you will be listened to. At the end of the day, I want to see accountability. People have made choices and decisions and brought in medical advice and ignored other medical advice. They've controlled media. And for me, I want to see accountability. I want to see people held accountable for the fact that people have lost loved ones and the fear. And I have been able to at least come and talk openly about what's happened with me. And I've listened to other people's stories, and there's no judgment. And it's an opportunity.
So yeah, let's continue on that a bit, because yes, there's a community element. Yes, there's an opportunity for people to come together, to work together. There's a healing that needs to take place in the community. Yet there is a court case or court cases. So what's the rationale for that? Now, Sophia, you talked about accountability. Christine, you followed through with some examples. So let's have a conversation now about some of the, the damages that we've seen in the community, things that we've experienced personally or that others who are close to us have experienced, for those who are wondering why this whole process is necessary beyond the healing, So I will start off by saying, for example, you have people who have lost their jobs, or people who have quit their jobs not because they wanted to quit their jobs, but just because they were being asked to take risks or to make choices that they weren't personally comfortable with. And prior to this period, those type of choices were respected.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we entered into an era where those choices weren't respected at all, you know? And so people felt pushed to make decisions that they otherwise wouldn't have decided to make. A lot of people love their jobs, privacy, in terms of what they were doing. They actually had good relationships within their workplace, even with their employers. And then all of a sudden, having a different view, you know, put them on the outskirts. And all of a sudden they were becoming targeted and victimized and things of that nature. You know what I mean? So, and obviously this is all around the COVID injections. This was around testing, SafeKey, which everyone knew was not working because SafeKey was launched at a time when it was established globally that the COVID injections were not stopping the virus from spreading and was not stopping people, was not making people immune. So words like immunity were used when there was no immunity taking place with the COVID jabs. But that was being thrown out and policies were put in place that were victimizing people who hadn't taken the jab, you know, and putting people in awkward positions where they had to make choices, like I said, that they otherwise wouldn't have made, or they were fired. You had people who took the COVID jabs and had adverse effects. You have doctors who told them that the jabs were safe without having data to support that, right? Then when they had adverse effects, you had doctors telling them that it had nothing to do with the jabs, again, with no evidence to support that and no interest in looking into it further. You know, you had governments that were coercing people. People were offering prizes, money, vacations, all sorts of things. You had companies getting involved, assisting government in offering benefits to people to take the COVID jabs that they were deeming was safe and effective, in spite of the fact that the data was clearly showing that it was not. You have people who have gone into the hospital, said to have tested positive for COVID, even though they didn't go into the hospital for anything COVID related. Those people were administered a protocol for COVID using medications or pharmaceuticals that data has shown has proven harm to people. Meanwhile, those same people, in many cases, were denied access to treatments that doctors around the world were proven to be successful. There are people who have died being denied access to treatments that otherwise could have saved their lives. These are some of the things that's happened in the community, you know. Also, you've had people who have been forced to pay outrageous amounts of money to stay in a hotel quarantine, being deemed to be a risk to public health without sufficient evidence to support it. You have people who were not able to return home because of what do they call this? The travel authorization?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or some other form. You literally had people who were being denied, who were stuck at airports, being denied access to come back to their own home. You have people, as I said, who were fired. You also had people who now, after being coerced, are being set aside and nobody's even looking into them. You have children that have been targeted. The government actually came in and said that if you have a child and you're a foster parent, the foster parent doesn't have the right to choose whether the child gets the COVID jab. The actual government pediatrician has the right to tell you. In some countries around the world, children were being given the right to make the decision on their own. So anyway, these are some of the examples. I mean, it's open. I've started it, so you can chime in. I don't know, Michael and Sophia,
Oh, I see there's a
in
question.
terms of giving some examples, you know. And yes, in the audience, we definitely want to have questions come in. You know, we're here to talk a bit and to give an overview, but we really want to get questions coming in from the community. So I see one up on the screen now. What about kids that have been negatively affected, anxiety, depression, or extreme peer pressure? Can the CAST help them? Anyone like to answer that?
I think we,
Yes.
yeah, there we
Please join the cast
Yes.
immediately.
Mhm.
Yes. In many
And
cases.
the bigger issue.
Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
Sorry, Gene. And the bigger issue, of course, is that a lot of the wounds that we may have been experienced are not necessarily wounds that we can see, and these wounds are gonna run deep for not just this 2-year period, but for the foreseeable future. Mental health, like any other injury, needs to heal. Yeah, mental health is, you leave scars mentally, and they need to heal. And so, you know, we may not be able to see the injuries for these people, but we're definitely going to see the repercussions of these last 2 years showing up in the children, showing up in people who've been isolating a lot. Yeah, if you've ever seen a prisoner who's been in solitary confinement and see what it does to them, yeah, it's horrific. And when we start to see people who are in isolation a lot, it does funny things to their mental capacity. And we're going to start to see these things playing out. Myself personally, I've lost friends to suicide in the last 2 years, where it became too much for them. So I fully understand what that process can look like. And I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg now.
Mm-hmm. Mel?
Well, when you were talking and listing all those different scenarios, what has come up for me recently, but definitely when you listed those things off, it's like being in an abusive relationship where the boundaries aren't clear, it's unpredictable, it's there's little transparency. You never know when it's going to shift. Like you're on shaky ground the whole time. And it's an abuse of power. That's what it feels like. You know, that you're not comfortable, you're on edge, you don't know, you know, what's coming next. You feel a victim, like you're put in your place all the time, put in your place. And so now when you want to express yourself, oh no, but you can't do that. You need to stay in your box, you know? Sounds like I'm speaking from experience.
Well,
Regardless.
we have this image up. We have this image up on the screen now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you have the government holding someone down, representing the people, and the media forcing COVID down the throat. You know?
Yeah.
So when you were talking, this image came to mind as relevant, you know, to the scenario. And the media has played a huge role in this.
Yeah, absolutely.
As well, because the media has taken a narrative and literally hammered it into people over and over and over and over and over, you know. And what we've learned, if we hadn't learned prior to this, is that, you know, regardless of something's true or not, if you keep repeating it over and over and over and over and over, people will start to take it on.
Yeah, they believe it.
And people believe it.
Absolutely.
You know?
And anything alternative to that thinking or a different point of view is censored.
Right.
It's named, it's called, you know, misinformation. Yeah. It's not valid.
Right. So this picture comes to mind now. Yeah. So now you have a person who's actually feels differently about what's going on and starts to communicate that in a circle that he once considered friends.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now
he's chastised.
Victimized.
He's called crazy.
Exactly.
You know, and whether he's right or not, you know, they haven't even considered, because it's not the status quo point of view.
Right. Right. Yeah. So it's a very interesting thing that has happened, and how do you recover from that? How do you address that? And if people have been harmed severely, right? Is it okay to just allow that to pass without it ever being addressed?
Well, so this is the point that I was coming to. You know, in say a situation of domestic violence or something like this, where there's an abuse of power, the person that is the abuser justice has to be done.
Yeah.
Has to be made. Has to be.
Right.
And then the victim is left to heal, if they are willing to face that healing. But they have to acknowledge that they have.
And I think Eugene. So, and sorry, Mel, to interrupt there, but I think the important thing also to mention is that you're in danger of normalizing the abusive behavior. Right. And when those people who are victims of abuse, they find that actually, well, no, that's okay, because that's normal. And when you normalize behavior like that, it becomes incredibly dangerous, because you don't even know it exists. And so this is what people have been talking about now with getting back to normal, going post-COVID, is that actually what they don't realize is that they're normalizing and accepting very abusive and abnormal behavior. And it's very difficult to heal when you're normalizing abusive behavior.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So I'm thinking of the list we started, and we haven't even gotten into any financial side of it, you know. What about people who, we talked about people who were fired, people who are unable to take care of their families, people who lost their properties because they had no revenue coming in to be able to service the rent or the mortgage, people who are evicted from the houses. And yes, I remember there was like maybe a 3-month period, possibly 6 months, that, you know, landlords, you know, were being a bit understanding. Even the banks, you know, said, okay, if you're not able to make your mortgage payments, we're going to give you like a little break. But I could tell you that once that was over, that was it. It was no more breaks after that, you know, and people had to pay. And if you didn't have the capacity, then you had the constant chopping and changing around the lockdowns, if we can remember, because it's been 2 years. So it's easy to forget these things, right? But remember, like, it would be an announcement that all of a sudden it was a lockdown, like in 2 days.
Yeah.
You know, so
or it was going to be the next day, like
or
6
the next
a.m.
day.
It starts 6 a.m. the next day. Yeah.
So imagine a business that's purchased inventory, restaurants, right? They purchase inventory, and now it's a lockdown.
Exactly.
So all of that goes to waste, is spoiled. And then if you don't even have enough time, you have to organize for all your staff. You're going to deal with all the human resource side of it. Then you're going to talk about the waste. And if you don't even have a chance to give it away, it literally gets thrown away. And nobody's giving you back the money for that.
It's quite remarkable that any restaurants in Bermuda are still open. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It really actually is, you know? So then you had the business closures. How many businesses are closed? How many business ventures that were on the verge of launching, right, never made it across the line? That's something that is even more difficult to find out. But what we do know is that people who were in business are not in business anymore. And that's gone. How do you compensate for that? You know, what if somebody made a decision for your family member, you know, without consulting you? Because we had this scenario around the world where all of a sudden people felt that it was their right to enforce, right, a medication or a treatment, an experimental one at that, on everyone else and that people should just comply. Like, why won't you take the shot? Like, what is your problem?
Yeah.
You know, what's wrong with these people? How can they be so selfish? But in reality, who was being selfish? But this was the prevailing thought process. And if you stood outside of that, you were targeted. You know, some people who had applied for jobs and been accepted never got their job and were left unemployed. It's so many different things when you start to unravel this. And we haven't even really just got into like the mental stress and the anguish. You know, people who are distanced from their family and friends now. You know, I remember somebody who was heartbroken, you know, their friend had gotten a new car. They called them excited. Oh, I see you got your new car. You finally got it. You know, we're going to have to go for a ride one day. Have you had this shot?
Wow.
It broke their heart. Because all of a sudden now, they couldn't even go on a ride with them. But see, the thing is, right? Who do you blame in that situation? Is it the person or all the institutions and all the media that was driving that narrative down on people? Were people acting in their right minds? Or were people duly influenced by external forces?
Yeah.
You know, what about the fact that it was revealed early out that the virus was made in a lab? Where did that story go?
Well, it was shut down, right? I mean, every media outlet across the world shut that down. And then a year later, as Fauci's emails became public knowledge, it then became a topic of conversation. Of course, it's from a lab, or, you know, that it was headed in that direction. So the media has been, you know, you talk about if you have an alternative view and you're said that you're misinformation. When I believe that we've had a lot of misinformation forced on us by governments, by media, that's where the misinformation is. And that's where joining the cast, telling your story, documenting your story, and as a collective, we get accountability, we get access to data. I mean, we heard the government talk about science all the time, but I didn't see them present science. I'd like to see the science. I'd like to see how they made their decisions, but how do we do that? So I think that the collective action that we're taking, part of that will be getting access to the data that allowed governments and others to make the decisions that they did.
Right.
Like, why was ivermectin treated like it was just a horse dewormer? Like, where did government get the science to actually, you know, present that and say, no, ivermectin is not a suitable solution for COVID? Like, how do you do that? Join the cast, tell your story, fill in an intake form. You can start off, we can, you know, with the confidentiality, but tell your story. The more people we have that come together and tell their story, the more pressure we can put on for accountability. Because for me, this should never happen again. It's only been 75 years since World War II. We've had the Nuremberg trials, we had Nuremberg Code, and all of it was just thrown out the window. So I want accountability. I want people charged with crimes against humanity. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is a lot, and the list can go on and on. So, you know, I'm not sure if we have any questions yet that are coming from persons who are watching, but we did go out in the community and we collected some questions ourselves. So I'm just going to share that. Oh, I see we have something up. Oh my gosh, why are you breathing oxygen? Don't you realize that it is essential for life? Stop it. What other choice is there? You have to inhale your own poisonous gas over a prolonged period, develop other respiratory diseases, and gradually die. it's the only way to protect us from COVID. Yeah, very interesting comment. Yeah. Well, that's another thing, because the mask mandates, it's so many things. It's like the hand sanitizer, the masks, the lockdowns, the social distancing, all of that was proven to be ineffective very early on. Yet, to this day, it's still being practiced to this day. And anyone who speaks out against it is targeted. What would you say to the people who are fearful of coming forward with their story? Would anyone like to comment on that?
Maybe Sophia, because she's had so much courage.
You must question what you are fearful of. Are you fearful of losing your job? You will not lose your job because you have power in numbers and you will be anonymous. Are you fearful of losing your work permit? You will not lose your work permit because that is discrimination and there will be power in numbers and you will have an anonymity. Are you fearful of what your family is going to think of you? Well, you come in by yourself and you go out by yourself. And unless you make a difference in the world, it's not going to be better. You have to take accountability for yourself.
Right.
So fear not. Talk to more people who have courage. We have your back, we have your front, we have your top and bottom. We have both sides. We have you and you have support. Your community needs you. You need you. Your legacy needs you. Listen to your ancestors. Ask them. We don't want this to happen again. We will help you find that courage.
Well, yeah, I think it is a key thing. The confidentiality is an important thing. That's something that is definitely being observed in this process. And just so that people understand, if you have questions about the process, is that once you do the intake form, there is a team of members who are reviewing those, but they're just being organized to be able to go to lawyers who will then look through them. In there, it asks if you're open to being contacted by members of the cast. And if you are, then someone will reach out to you and follow up with you about your story. And then, you are involved with the whole process. So essentially you determine how far it goes. So you have total control over the situation. It's not a situation where anyone is trying to do something that you're not comfortable doing. That's the situation that we're trying to get beyond. Is people being forced to do things that they're not comfortable doing. And I guess, Mel, your point about family is really key. Because yes, this has been evolving like a family. And essentially we're all connected in the community. Anyway. And we're just acknowledging that and looking to act in accordance with that reality.
And I'd just like to share that I actually filled in a form just to test it out. And it was really a beautiful process. I was able to go through all the emotions. I got really angry just thinking about all the injustice and all the kind of inconvenience. And after I got through all of that, I sort of sat for a moment and I thought, wow, what a year. And then I sort of picked myself up, I dusted myself off, and I gave thanks, actually. I felt very grateful that for me, because of the choices I made, I've come through more or less unscathed, but I've also been able to embrace this opportunity and connecting with new people, reconnecting with old people, and just going through some sort of an evolution with it. So I would encourage people simply to fill out the form and then think about it, what you want to do.
That's a good idea.
You don't have to do anything, but I'm just sharing that filling out the form for me was quite cathartic.
Yeah. All right. So we had some other questions here. Will I get in trouble with my job or the law should I decide to get involved with the cast? So Sophia, I think you just talked about that one a bit, but it's a reality.
Mhm.
It's a reality, and I mean, I know of people who have have suffered damages from their employer, and even talking to lawyers, lawyers have advised them not to go against their employer.
Mm.
And I think this is why the C.A.S.T is important, because going individually, the odds are stacked up against you so much, that's why, like, a lawyer would even say, you know what, yes, I agree, you've suffered in this. This is not just at all. However, the prospect of you going to learn looks really, really challenging, could cost you a lot of money, potentially more money that you have. And at the end of the day, the company you're going up against has long money, and they can sustain the process.
Yeah.
So this is another reason why the C.A.S.T is valuable, because regardless of whether you have the financial means yourself individually or not, there's an opportunity to go with a group, and those who have the financial means can contribute, and all of us can come together and be represented, for the damages that we've suffered. But anybody else like to elaborate that about the job scenario, because and the law?
Yes, I think, Eugene, I've been approached by a number of people on the street who've had that concern, and they're very fearful of losing their job. But as Sophia pointed out, a lot of these laws were mandated, but they've not actually been set into practice. So, yeah, if you get fired from your job because you didn't take a vaccine, or you refused the test, these are discriminatory processes, and you should not be fearful of that. Even though somebody in a place of authority is telling you that, and that could be your boss, it could be somebody that you look up to. The process itself is very difficult to hold that up in law. So that's something for individuals to consider in this case as well.
Yeah, I always like to use this analogy. I used to do a lot of cross country when I was in school, and so you have that fresh breeze. You go out and you run, and everybody bursts out and starts running fast and stuff, and then you start to get really tired. And at that point, you can't imagine that you have the capacity to actually finish the race. You just want to stop, or you're just consumed with, you just want to stop. What I learned is that if you just keep running, you just keep going, then eventually your second breeze kicks in. And then you actually forget that you were tired in the first place. So it's a similar situation like this. You have this seemingly insurmountable, challenge in front of you.
Yeah.
And you're like, how on earth am I going to get to the other side of this? So what I like to say to people is, just like the running, if you break running down to just one foot forward, bend the next knee, other foot forward, bend the next knee, other foot forward. If you just think about your breath and your steps, that's something that you're totally in control of. Next thing you know, you just find yourself at the end of the race. So if in this situation, we just focus on the things that we can do, apply ourselves, overcome that fear, then somehow, the magic carpet sweeps in, because we make our own luck. There's no such thing as luck. We make that opportunity. And next thing, we find ourselves at the finish line. The one thing we know is that if you stop running, you definitely won't finish. You definitely won't finish. You know what I mean? So in order to give yourself the opportunity, keep going. So in this case, I would just encourage anyone who is suffering silently, who does have a claim, I just encourage you to just follow through the process. The process is put there to help all of us. Just engage the process and follow it through, you know. And as we take more and more steps, the confidence comes, you know, and somehow, some way, we find ourselves in a better place. So let's give ourselves the opportunity to do that.
And just Eugene, may I say, just the imagery there is, if you're going on a run alone, the temptation to stop is greater than if you're being cheered on by like-minded people in the same race, or you know, whatever it is. If you're there in a team, it's much easier than if you're alone.
Right, because you have someone to lean on in your time and
support
need.
you.
Yes,
And
or cheer you on,
others
or
can lean on you
Yeah,
in their time as well.
or hand you water, or whatever it is.
Okay. All right. So
That was beautifully said. We're near the end of the finish line. Beautifully said.
give thanks.
You can't see the finish line when you first start. You just know you have to keep going, and we're close to the finish line. The two of us, we know. You know how that feels. You know how it feels in the beginning, and you just get that second wind and that third, whatever. You know, you're.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, Sophia,
That you have to keep going.
Yeah, you definitely have to keep going, because at the beginning of Sophia and Michael's whole experience, when you had over 20 police officers converging on our residence, police officers banging on the door, it was hard to imagine that they could be in the position that they're in now. Now they're in a position where the government keeps pushing their case back and back and back. No, maybe the government's not running. It certainly seems that way, though. You know? So all of a sudden now, they found themselves coming from a place where authorities were seeking to get on top of them. They're now in a position of authority over the same authoritative figures. You know, and they're very calm and peaceful about their scenario and standing in their truth, you know, whilst the government keeps pushing back. So, and only if you would have, it's only through you standing in that space that the opportunity to be in the position you're in now emerge. And that's the key element in it, you know, so give thanks for that. So some other questions. We talked about this a bit too. Will I risk losing my work permit if I join the C.A.S.T? That's a real scenario. There's definitely fear in the community around work permits. Guest workers on the island feel very fragile, you know, because my understanding is that if you're deemed to be breaking the law, then that can be used to send you out of the country, you know. The other thing about work permits is that employers, companies are concerned about being truthful about their situation, because they're concerned that they're going to be denied work permits for their staff. So it's a lot of fear mongering that's going on. And it's, you know, one of my biggest concerns is that we're actually in a situation where people feel afraid of a government that's been put in place to serve their interests. The government is put in place to serve our interests, to work for us, to facilitate the things we need to prosper. Yet we're in a situation where the community is afraid of that same entity, you know? So what do we say to people with work permits? Any thoughts?
I think, again, that notion of collectively coming together, you know, we can overcome any obstacle together.
Right. So we need the numbers, definitely, for sure. So will I get money or some form of reparations?
Eugene, can we go back to work permits for a second?
Oh, I'm sorry, Sophie. No problem. Go ahead.
Oh, we lost them.
Yeah.
But the human side of it,
Okay,
you know,
Mike,
and
you're gonna
you
have
know,
to start
we
again,
tend to
Mike.
get, we get,
Mike, you're gonna have to
no
start
problem.
again. We lost you for a minute.
So, okay, can you hear me now?
Yes. Mm.
Yeah. Just saying, we need to remember that the human side of this story, you know, we're talking about policies and protocols and mandates and laws and these things that are all man-made, but there's a humanness part to all of this, you know. And I think it's so important for us to remember that, you know, somebody on a work permit is no less of a person than a Bermudian, right? And I think there's sometimes that there's those discriminatory lines that we draw, whether they're conscious or unconscious. But at the end of the day, these are our tribe, right? These are our people. And there's a human element that people need to remember. We all serve the community in all of our different ways. It needs all of us to work. So if we can go back to that place of acknowledging, you know, if I'm on a work permit, if I'm Bermudian, if I'm an expat, if I'm whatever your label you fall under, you're a human first before you're an expat, yeah, before you're an immigrant worker, before you're a Bermudian, you know. So I want to bring people back to that moment of that truthfulness.
Give thanks. Give thanks. So yeah, so the next question that I had, thank you for that, Mike, was around reparations. Will I get money or some form of reparations from government for the death of my relative? You know? Now we had another question that I think is fitting to put out there that's kind of related to that, because someone else was asking, how is the government even responsible for people going into the hospital and dying? How? Why is this a case? Why is that coming up around the government? How is the government responsible for that? Anyone want to talk about that a bit?
The way that I saw it was that you have a health minister so the government has emergency use powers, and the health minister has put together a team because she has no medical experience herself, but she's put together a team and identified what the protocols would be. Natural immunity hasn't been taken into account even today. You have protocols that were put in place that were shown to be ineffective or actually lead to death. You had people who were sent home because they were found that they were positive with no protocols to help them through it other than to come back when you can't breathe. So yeah, the government has controlled the narrative. They've controlled their powers. So they're accountable for what's happening.
Yeah,
or what has happened.
Right, what has happened. And also there's a clear link between the hospital and the government.
Well, I would imagine that the CMO was probably hired by the health minister, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, again, that's how they're responsible. They've controlled it. They've said what it'll be. The only way out of the pandemic was these shots that actually doesn't stop you from catching it or spreading it. People have been rewarded if they took the shots, and people have been penalized if they did not. So if you were unvaccinated and tried to come back to the island, you might have had to pay $7,000 for a hotel. You know what? Join the cast. Fill in an intake form. Let's present that. Let's get you back your money.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Well, the burden of proof would need to be on them to prove why that was necessary and what was the benefit of that. You know what I mean?
Which is back to, if we come at it collectively and we have people and we put the pressure on, we can get to the data and to the science as to why they took the direction that they took when doctors around the world had protocols. Early treatment is true with every disease and illness. You don't all of a sudden, somebody comes and says you have stage 1 cancer don't come back until you have stage 4. They immediately start treatments. They try off-label drugs. They do everything to support that person. Why, in the case of this virus, even if you had the flu, you have a protocol that you can follow to help. Why with this virus was it go home, wait until you can't breathe, and check yourself into a hospital?
Right. Yeah, just listening to you, there is a few things come to mind. One is that the chief of staff and the CMO and the health minister definitely made some very clear claims. One,
Yes,
that ivermectin could and would play no part in assisting people with dealing with COVID. They made that very clear. They actually made statements in the media to say that any doctors on the island that were encouraging its use were spreading misinformation. The CMO also encouraged people to come to the hospital to be treated, which means the CMO endorsed the treatment protocol that was being administered, in spite of the concerns, one, that people weren't being allowed to use ivermectin, and two, that people were concerned, primarily about remdesivir and ventilators, but they stood behind that and they endorsed that. They also endorsed the COVID injections, and organized all sorts of things to coerce people into taking them, and told people that it was safe and effective, right? They denied that people were suffering adverse effects. I don't think we've had any reports from the government officially acknowledging adverse effects on the island. And if they have acknowledged anything, it may be 1 or 2 cases, but for the number of people who have been harmed by the shot, even people who are no longer with us after taking the shot, the fact that they've denied anything, any connection, is another thing that obviously makes them, liable for their statements and their actions.
Agreed.
You know what I mean? So our question is, should these people be allowed to just go on without having to face up to these statements that they've made? They've constantly made, we've yet to see any data. They've told people that natural immunity doesn't work, as you said. They've told people that the shot is safe and effective. That getting the shot, your immunity is better than if you catch the virus and recover. Where is the data to support that? We've yet to see it. But yet they continue to push it, So.
Well, what comes to my mind as you're speaking, Eugene, is that, remember, this was a pandemic. And so it was the world over. So we're not the only ones having this conversation. There are other people pressing charges, looking into this, the whole world over. So again, we're not alone. We're in this together. So we take examples from them. They'll take examples for us. And whatever it is, we all have to stand firm in what we believe.
Well, the thing is, I know talking to doctors, because we've had several doctors from outside of Bermuda are involved with Sophie and Michael's case. They have shown a willingness to support in any court cases. And even those doctors have encouraged, local and international, have encouraged us to stick to it, to band together, to support each other, and to move forward with these cases. Because short of that, they're not seeing any other really tangible way of being able to get any type of positive outcome from the scenario, or being able to address the concerns that people have had. So this process is necessary because it puts the burden of proof on the authorities. Prove why all of this was necessary. Prove that your statements are credible. Show us the evidence, right, that backs up the protocols and the policies that you put in place. You know what I mean? The burden of proof is on them. Whereas all this time they've been pointing fingers at everybody else. Here's an opportunity to question them. Yes, Michael.
Yeah, Eugene. So, and what was interesting interesting, wasn't it, as we went through the pandemic, how even the CDC and the WHO started to shift their narrative, but governments were reluctant to change their story. So even though the so-called governing bodies or the authorities that governments were turning to demonstrate there was some kind of credibility to their story, as the CDC and the WHO changed several of their policies, governments were reluctant to let go of the previous policy. So the justification just isn't there. Yeah.
Yeah, for real.
I also wanted to add that we stick to the wicket. We've done 4 antibody tests over the past year, and there's still robust antibodies there. We've been exposed, we caught B117, we were exposed closely to Delta, like we were in Delta, and Omicron, and we still have robust immunity in our blood. We know it. We have the paperwork to prove it.
Well, and thank you for that, Sophia. The challenge is that, it came out very early out that, people who had SARS could have won 17, 18 years ago, still had immunity.
Yeah.
So a lot of this stuff is really laughable, because as you said, Michael, evidence was coming out. Even some governing authorities were making shifts, and governments weren't making the shifts with them. Why on earth were we giving COVID injections to children when it was clear that children were at like zero risk?
Yeah.
And that authorities around the world were saying that the risk of the injection is greater than the risk of them. Actually, you want the virus to go through the children. So they just build up immunity and go on because it's not impacting them like that. Now again, somebody might say, where do you get the data to show that? That's why we need the court case. So that everybody can bring that data to the table, and then we can see. And at the end of the day, right, if things that were done were merited, fine.
Yeah.
Right? If things were done and caused damage unnecessarily, well, then people need to be held responsible for that. So that's just a big thing in the community. I have some more questions here I want to go through. Yeah, this is interesting. So for people who are long-standing and strong supporters of the PLP, will supporting the C.A.S.T contribute to the PLP losing the next election? That's actually a good question, because I think there's a lot of people thinking that. Anybody like to make any comments around that? I see a lot of smiles.
Yeah, it's tough to say, Eugene. It's tough to say, because I think everybody at the beginning of the pandemic realized actually that the PLP had done a great job of lining things up, of getting things organized. They had their hands tied like every government in the world. They didn't know what to do. They were following guidelines set by other people, and Bermuda did fantastic. They got their ducks in a row really early. Sophia and I were one of the first people to arrive back on island on the air bridge flight from London. I think we were the first flight into Bermuda when the airport had locked down. And they had all the protocols in place. We just didn't know back then. They did a good job. But as time went on, and it was that reluctance to shift or change, everyone's starting to say, well, hang on, things are changing. Why aren't they? And I think this is where we find ourselves now, in this sticky place of trying to understand, why did they hang on to these protocols for so long? And so that for me is maybe the question mark around what's been happening. But I wonder, would another political party have done any better? And I can't answer that question. I don't know. But will it be the demise of the PLP? Difficult to say. It's really up to them, I think.
Yeah. yeah, my thought on it is that, you know, politics a lot of times, and it's not just in Bermuda, you know, America's another place is the same thing. It's like politics is like sports. People pick the team and they just run with it, you know. At the end of the day, it's really not about the team, it's really not about who the administration is. It's about doing what's in the best interest of the country and its people. You know,
Yeah.
so if what you're doing is being done in that light, then you should feel comfortable and confident to do it regardless of your political affiliations. And anybody who is likewise supportive of the same political entity as you shouldn't really be questioning you or chastising you over you taking an action that's in the interest of the country and its people, or even just and your family, really. Because the government, as we said earlier, is here to facilitate things for the people. So regardless of who the government is, we shouldn't be thinking about elections and things anyway. We have challenges that are right in front of us. So that should be our focus. You know, that's what I would say too. You know? So here's another one. Is this lawsuit about taking money from a government already bogged down with growing and unsustainable debt, or are there other outcomes the group would deem to be favorable? I have seen a lot of comments, you know, and people are talking about the money, and it's no secret that the government is in debt. Wow, that's a whole nother conversation in itself. But any comments about that? You know, how will we deal with that? What if, you know, we're lying with all these claims with damages, you know? How does that get sorted? And is this all about money, or are there other things that this is about, you know?
So I think I spoke a little bit earlier about this, and I was, for me, it's about accountability. You know, if you've lost a loved one, if someone died in hospital and you couldn't even say goodbye, or they had an adverse effect and died afterwards because of the shot, no amount of money is going to bring that person back. For me, it would be, I want to know, how do we put something in place, laws in place or actions in place that this doesn't happen again.
Mm-hmm.
So accountability, I'm back to accountability. For me, it's about accountability and holding people accountable and for the decisions that were made.
Mm-hmm.
If they ended up in financial loss, mental illness, depression, anything that for me, it's not about money.
Right.
And maybe even an apology along the way.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, for real. Okay. We have something coming in from a viewer. If individuals of the PLP, not the PLP that push the narrative and policies, individuals in government have experienced the same stress and confusion that everyone else has, even fear to go, oh, I think I said ifs. Okay. Individuals of the PLP, not the PLP that push the narrative and policies, individuals in government have experienced the same stress and confusion that everyone else has, even fear of going against spread. So we talked about this a bit earlier, the fear that's in the community. I know I've talked about this a lot. That's something I'm personally concerned about, that people need to be so concerned about the government. Like, oh my gracious, if I say this, like, what is the government going to do to me? You know, so it's concerning that we're even in that situation. And yes, you know, Premier Brett's name comes up a lot. We see a lot going on even within the cabinet now, you know, and it seems to be a lot of fear around some type of retribution or retaliation coming from the government, regardless of whether you work for government, whether you're a business owner, whether you're just a layperson in the community, whether you're in the cabinet, whether you're in the backbench. It seems like, if you're a business owner, everybody's concerned. Gas workers, we talked about that. So that's a really big issue that I feel that we need to find a way to get beyond. Because as people, as a community, we need to be thinking about how we're going to support each other, how we're going to grow, how we're going to prosper, how we can improve our quality of life, how we can take care of our families. We don't need to be spending energy worrying about what the government's going to do to us. That's a totally unnecessary distraction.
Exactly. And if I may say,
Yeah.
you're using the word worry, right? Worry, I've always said, I used to say it to my mother, it's a wasted emotion. You're worrying about something you don't know, right? You don't know, which leads me to the FEAR as an acronym. False evidence appearing real. So it's false. It's a delusion that we create. It hasn't even happened, but we're worried about it. Let's get in reality. Let's stand in our truth. We know what's real. We know what is happening. We know what we can control. What we can't control, let go of it. But come back home to self. And I've said this before. Come back home to self and get aligned with who you truly are and know what's real. And be fearless. What are we afraid of?
Right. Okay. All right. So let's go down to a few more questions here. Is the C.A.S.T an anti-vaxx group? Oh boy. Well, I know the newspaper's done the best to try to single me out as an anti-vaxxer, in spite me communicating with them directly. I don't think I've ever said anything declaring that I'm an anti-vaxxer, but so maybe my involvement makes it look like that. But what do you guys say to that? Is the group is the C.A.S.T an anti-vaxx group?
No.
Yep, absolutely not. No.
We don't discriminate in that way.
Right.
I think we're pro-health, we're pro-choice, and we'll listen to anybody with any view, and consider how that fits.
Right.
And the other thing is, it's either all or nothing, right? You're either pro-vax or anti-vax.
Yeah.
Like, is that real? Can you not have some view of, actually, I'd like to take the vaccine, but if I did, it would kill me. Therefore, I'm not going to take it. It doesn't make me anti-vax. It means I can't have it.
Yeah.
There are all sorts of nuances in between.
Yeah, or maybe you're just concerned that it's not safe.
Yeah.
And you've yet to see anything that's made you feel comfortable.
It's not for me.
I mean, that's been the thing that so many people have said. And people have been pushed. People have been singled out. It's like, what is wrong with you? Why don't you just take it? And then this view that everybody should just have to take it. People shouldn't have the choice on their own. I'm like, what? Like, where did that come from? People started mandating it for work. So it's interesting. So you had the airline industry mandating it. And now they're under concern about pilots getting blood clots.
Make it make sense, Eugene.
Yeah. So it's like, and that's why we shouldn't rush into these things, and that's why this one size fits all has never really applied. That's why you have different cultures and customs all around the world,
And also, if we could remember that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, right? And it seems really heavy and all this retribution and abuse and all these big words. But at the end of the day, we're here to have fun. We're here to have a joyful life, and that may seem difficult at times. But if we can crawl out of our despair and our hurt and through the healing, we can have a better time. We can accept joy and have a lighter feeling about ourselves and have that fun human experience. It doesn't have to be heavy.
Right.
Hasn't been fun for a couple of years
No.
now.
Yeah,
appreciate
it's
that.
been pretty difficult. So we have another question coming in. Are vaccine adverse events being recorded in Bermuda? If so, how? If not, why not? Well, yeah, this has been a big thing. I know, Sophia, you've spoken previously about this. Our understanding is that there were no records being taken initially, none at all. And then after being questioned, the government popped up and said that they had someone who was responsible for that. I understand that, that person has yet to be found. There was a nurse at the hospital, and that person's yet to be found. So if you call, people have called the hospital trying to get in contact with the person and have been unable to get in contact with them. And even people at the hospital didn't even know where to direct the phone call. So the appearance was given that efforts were being made to record things, but there's yet to be any information shared with the general public. And for those who followed up with that process, there doesn't seem to be that much energy was put towards making that happen. I know the comments I've heard from people constantly is that anytime somebody went with a complaint, even doctors have shared this with me, that they're told that other practitioners or people at the hospital or things of that nature, the first thing out of their mouths has been, no, it has nothing to do with the jab.
I remember when the vaccine or the jab first rolled out, I think it was the first 6 weeks, they made note of 40 cases of adverse events. On a press conference they had dispelling the myths of the vaccination. Nothing since. Not a peep. So it would be interesting to see if they have recorded that information and if they could share it with the public, because that certainly would be a way for people to discern whether they were going to take the jab or not. If they knew what was on the table. That's the thing. We can't make decisions blindly. We shouldn't have to. We should have as much information available to us as possible.
And that's the theme now. Information wasn't shared, right? People were bombarded with commercials, with the media. Doctors were going out telling people, this is what you need to do for the community. People in politics were selected, made commercials. Everyone was being coerced to go one way. People weren't shared any information about adverse events. So there was no informed consent at all. And people were literally scared into getting it. I know of so many people who either took it because they were made to feel afraid, or they took it because of the job, or they took it because they wanted to travel. And I really feel for those people. People who were coerced. People who didn't want to do it and ended up doing it. And now they're having to live with that they made a decision that they didn't want to make. And it's something that they're not able to take back. So this already happened. So it's unfortunate, but it's already happened. People have already been coerced. So if that is a scenario that fits your experience, then the C.A.S.T is there to receive those intakes. The coercion is real. Sophia, I see you have your hand up.
I just want to remind you that Mel and I started a grassroots national COVID immunity reporting, and we have a Facebook page since for a whole year now. And people will stop us in the streets. People will call. They'll call anonymously. They've been reporting to us. We are not the government, but they have been reporting to us, and we have been helping them. We have been, they're telling their doctor, but they're also telling us. And so we have been supporting them.
Right.
So we started the grassroots, and that's what we're doing now. We are taking control of the situation.
Right.
And that is as a community effort,
Right.
you know, because it's important.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just say this generally, for a lot of the people, that level of support has helped immensely, where they felt they had nowhere else to turn.
Right.
So.
Yeah. All right. So I'm just going to take a quick break. I'm going to replay the video about the C.A.S.T for anyone who joined us, who just joined us in the middle. And when we come back, we're just going to get closing comments from everyone. The goal is to do more of these going forward. So before the end of this, we can announce some additional dates for more public forums, but we really want to hear from the community. We really want to get questions from the community so we can help people feel a bit more comfortable with the process, answer any questions that people may have, you know, out there in the community. So we'll be right back in a few minutes. Give thanks.
The Collective Action Solidarity Trust.
Let justice be done, though the heavens fall.
The C.A.S.T is a newly formed action group of Bermuda residents, citizens, and businesses who are dedicated to improving the state of Bermuda's justice system, especially as it relates to the recovery from any public mismanagement of the pandemic.
The C.A.S.T holds the view that many of the potentially excessive pandemic protocols may have caused injury to a wider cross-section of individuals and businesses than was absolutely necessary. Those aggrieved have a right to be heard as a matter of natural justice and public safety.
We invite all interested parties and individuals of Bermuda to carefully document the range of physical, financial, legal, emotional, and mental damages they have suffered or may still be suffering from the alleged mishandling of the pandemic.
To participate in the adjudication process, please visit our website, jointhecast.org, and submit your claim by Thursday, April 14, 2022.
The Collective Action Solidarity Trust.
Let justice be done, though the heavens fall.
All right, everyone, we're back. So apologies for persons who have been asking questions. I understand there were a number of questions that we didn't realize were here. So we're going to go through and try to answer some of those or post up some of those questions now. Let's see here. So we have one here from Mia Hartman. How is it that the government can say so confidently that the COVID cases will go up again this past Thursday? My observation is that every time a shot is administered, the cases skyrocket.
Very good observation, Mia. Very good.
Yeah, I find it interesting because I know that, and maybe some of the parents in the audience can, you know, contribute to this. But I know I heard that when the shots were administered to the children, that all of a sudden there were all these outbreaks in the schools. And for anyone who's been looking at this closely, there's been a lot of data that's been shared to show that there's some alignment with shots being administered, cases, hospitalizations, and things of that nature. If you look at the charts, those things are kind of going together, you know what I mean? And when you look at the countries that have administered the most COVID jabs, then those countries have had, right, you know, I mean, the gulf of the difference is immense, but the cases in those countries have been exponentially higher than in countries where they haven't had access to the jabs, you know, so. Yeah,
the interesting thing that I remember the government saying was that the cases were in young people in the 20 and under. It would have been interesting if they had been more forthcoming and actually said, was it between 5 and 11-year-olds? Because they were the ones that were getting getting the
shots.
jabs.
Yeah.
But they just gave a broad thing. It was under 20. It was young people. So I think there is a correlation between that and the jabs.
Yeah. So Mia went on to say it happened when the shot first came out, the second shot, the first booster, the cases went up. Watch and see within the next 2 to 4 weeks now that the fourth shot is being given. We'll have a high case rate again. Government will then say that it's due to the mask mandate being dropped. Folks were being careless. More lies from them. Yeah, so it is interesting. And again, just to point it, this is why we need to share our stories. Because people have been impacted in so many different ways from this, you know. And if we don't share our stories, then they will just stay within and people won't understand. Even those of us who have been heavily involved with this, right? The stories that we hear, it's always like, wow, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
So many different things. So here's another question or statement. Many are now against a harmful vax after realizing and experiencing injuries, even if they have trusted other vaccines. The experience around the world is too many adverse reactions.
Yeah.
And you've had medical professionals. I don't know how many medical professionals I've personally interviewed who said, Eugene, I'm very pro-vaccine.
Yep.
I've administered countless amounts of vaccines. But it's this one. One doctor said, never in my life have I ever seen people protest over a vaccine. Never in my life. And this is happening all around the world. So, yeah, very, very interesting. Fully informed consent means one is aware of all possible harms before they choose. It is impossible to fully inform of any experimental process where data is being observed and studied while it's being administered. So we've actually been in a live study, which was blasphemous to say, you know, a year ago, but it's the reality that's emerged. Yeah.
If I could just interject and
Go
say,
ahead.
you know, you were talking about sharing the stories. That is so vital. Yeah. Because it's like the stories against the science. That's how it comes up in my mind. And science is it's sort of prepackaged. You know, it has conditions and there's almost an anticipated outcome. And it can be manipulated, let's face it. You know, but the stories are where the real humanity comes in. And that's what keeps the traditions going. That's what keeps our culture going. That's what keeps communities going is stories, not gossip, not kind of talking about people, but the stories from the heart, shared heart to heart.
Right.
This is so important.
Right.
In a safe space. And we often, especially if we're telling, you know, stories around trouble and adversity, we have to feel safe in order to do that. And I can say that C.A.S.T will provide a safe space.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely the intention. I know that many families have been torn to shreds over the way things have unfolded. And it hurts to bring forth these experiences, because in the midst of bringing forth them, you're reliving it.
Yeah.
You know. Now, I think your point, Mel, was very good, because you said you felt all the emotion when you were filling out the intake form, but in the end of it, there was this sense of relief. You know, so that's the thing. Yes, it will be troubling going through it, but getting through it is what actually brings the relief. It's getting to, otherwise that fear of engaging it means that it's constantly just sitting there waiting to be triggered, and you're always having to deal with that.
That's it.
You know what I mean? But getting it out helps us to get beyond it. You know what I mean? So this intake form may be something that people are fearing, and that we understand. The idea is that together we can help each other get through this and get to the other side of it and enjoy some healing. And this comment up here now is highlighting this is happening all around the world. You know, which is why if you read the press statement on jointhecast.org, that it says about the government, its advisors, and those yet to be named. And it also talks about a class action lawsuit under American law and a representative action under Bermuda law. Because as this statement says, perhaps we should also consider that powerful outside entities have influenced our government, or one or two of our politicians at least. The vaccine agenda is international, with politicians from different nations all singing the same tune. So there has been this collective action internationally.
Yeah.
And that's been another surprising thing. When have we ever seen everyone do the same thing? I know that really puzzled me. I was like, wow, so everybody's approaching this the same way?
Yep.
Never seen that.
Yep, ever.
Never ever seen that before. Everybody has their own customs and their own, you know, people. I've been to countries and felt like I've been turned completely upside down because they live so differently from the way we live here.
It was like they were reading from a script. Everyone had the same language, words. It was scary.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm trying to look through to see if it's any other questions that are here. But if people have any other questions, please feel free to post them. I just want to get closing comments. So I'll start with Michael, you and Sophia. You guys are the furthest away, and it's far later there than it is here. So, yeah. What closing comments do you have for the audience?
Well, I just want to share and reiterate everything that's been said this evening. This has been a wonderful open conversation that should have been had 2 years ago, right? And between everybody. And also just to really reach out and say to anybody who's sitting on the fence, you will be supported, you will be heard, you will be listened to. So please join the cast as soon as you can. And I look forward to more discussion. And please reach out to us if you do have questions. If you have any reservations, reach out to us so that we can assist you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have some courage. Please have some courage. Come forward. Do this for you, as I said. Do it for your legacy. Do it for yourself, your people, your community, for the world. We need to speak up, and we will. We will do this together.
All right, good. Thanks. Mel, any closing comments from you?
I'd just like to say, come forward, be fearless. The word courage, the origins of it is from core, which is the heart. Come from your heart. What does your heart truly desire? Tap into that place and find out, and that may help you to come forward. And the other thing is, if not us, then who? Who's going to do this for us? This is our community. So if not us, who? And if not now, when? In another 2 years, another 10 years, when it's all forgotten and everybody's gone back to it would never go back to normal. It's distorted forever.
It is distorted forever.
So if we don't do it now, then it's never going to. Now is the time. So I encourage everybody to find it in themselves, to do it for yourself. Do it for yourself, and then that will trickle down to the rest of us. We're all connected.
Christine, any closing comments from you?
Very similar to everyone else. Have courage. Come forward. Tell your story. It's a safe space. Tell your story. The more people we can pull together and collectively put the pressure on, we will get answers. We will get this stopped. But it needs your support. We need your support to get this done.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, everyone. It's been really great having you all this evening. Thank you for everyone in the audience. We really appreciate you watching. And for all those who suffer silently, we feel for you.
Yeah.
We know that many people have been harmed over the past 2 years. We've all faced very difficult and challenging scenarios. And we're not here to say that everything done was harmful and that everything done was wrong. We're saying that there were some things that were positive that we appreciate. However, we're here to represent, all the experiences that we had that we didn't agree with, that just didn't feel right. We just knew that the discrimination, the separation, the coercion, the force, the abuse of power, it didn't rest well with any of us. Even those of us who supported everything that was happening in the beginning. We know that many of you find yourselves baffled and confused on the other side. This is not about finger pointing. This is not about creating damage and harm in the country. This is about helping us to support one another and bringing us all to a place of healing. We can run from challenging scenarios. And this is challenging. It is difficult to speak up. It's difficult to speak up anywhere. And Bermuda is one of the most difficult places to speak up because it's so small and everyone knows everyone. And everyone's everybody's cousin. And somebody's a relative down the line or a neighbor or a friend of your parents or of your spouse. And we know that we've all had difficult situations. Even in our relationships, they have become challenged. Family members have become estranged. Couples have faced very difficult moments and may find ourselves distance, a whole lot more distance between them than they would like. What we're saying is that if we can all collectively find the courage to bring our stories forward, to address these things that are sitting deep within our subconscious and in the back of our minds, then we can get to a place of healing and we can move from strength to strength. We've overcome things in the past and we can overcome things now. We are not sure how we can all benefit by trying to sweep all this under the rug. Let's face it. And if there's evidence to prove that things were credible and things were done in our collective best interest, then fine. We will accept that and move forward. However, if we find that things were done not in the interest of our people, but in the interest of others, that there are other agendas, right? That there are other plans and agreements behind the scenes that the community was not aware of, right? That needs to be exposed. And at least people need to be held accountable for the role that they played in this. This is not just about the government. Lots of people got involved with this process. Doctors, nurses, insurance companies, businesses, all sorts of people got involved with this, even family members. Whoever is responsible for causing harm to people in our community, to our family, those persons need to be addressed. And we're not saying that we want to push the same actions that we're complaining about on those people. We can choose how we deal with it on the other side. But let's get some acknowledgement. Let's understand what the reality is. And in that truth, we can find a light and we can find a means to move forward as a community. And most importantly, all the things that we find, or should we find anything that is out of place, we can ensure that we don't go through that ever again. That we create a future that generations to come would appreciate and enjoy. They will thank us for it. This is not just for us, it's for our children and their children as well. If we are ever to face something like this again, we all need to be far better prepared. And this situation can help with that. So again, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you guys again for coming, for sharing your spaces, for telling your stories, for giving your perspective. Thank you for all the audience for sticking with us throughout this broadcast. And we're looking to have another one. I think we decided that the next one would be the date next Thursday evening is, what is the date next Thursday evening, Christine?
The 7th?
The 7th?
The 7th. So for everyone, just to drive it in, the website is jointhecast.org. When you get to the website, there's an intake form. You can fill out the intake form. It asks you all the relevant questions depending on the nature of your claim. Right? You can submit. If you want to get in touch with us because you have more questions, email us at info@jointhecast.org. And we're collecting submissions up till April 14th. So on April 7th, we're planning another public forum. So if you go and you start the process and you have more questions, or you're still thinking about it and you have more questions, please join us again next week for another public forum. But thank you again, everyone. We really appreciate you joining us this evening, and have a good night. Peace and love.
The Collective Action Solidarity Trust.
Let justice be done, though the heavens fall.
The C.A.S.T is a newly formed action group of Bermuda residents, citizens, and businesses who are dedicated to improving the state of Bermuda's justice system, especially as it relates to the recovery from any public mismanagement of the pandemic.
The C.A.S.T holds the view that many of the potentially excessive pandemic protocols may have caused injury to a wider cross-section of individuals and businesses than was absolutely necessary. Those aggrieved have a right to be heard as a matter of natural justice and public safety.
We invite all interested parties and individuals of Bermuda to carefully document the range of physical, financial, legal, emotional, and mental damages they have suffered or may still be suffering from the alleged mishandling of the pandemic.
To participate in the adjudication process, please visit our website, jointhecast.org, and submit your claim by Thursday, April 14th, 2022.
The Collective Action Solidarity Trust.
Let justice be done, though the heavens fall.
Okay. There we go.
Gene, I think we're going to go to bed.
Yeah,
You think?
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you guys
Yes,
very
it's 1
much.
o'clock.
Thanks, Mara. Thank you.